About half the Newcastle District's 600 Telecom union employees attended a stop-work meeting in the West Leagues Club at midday. Local PSU, ATEA and ATPOA members didn't take part in the debate, listening instead to a landline linking them to mass rallies in Sydney and Brisbane. But when it came to the vote, the message to the government from union members was a resounding no to deregulation. The meeting endorsed a call for union leaders to consider preparing an industrial action campaign. However, for the moment, the unions will limit themselves to a public petition calling on the government to reconsider its plans for the telephone service.
The people that would pay more are the rural and domestic users. And also the downgrading of service would be an effect on them. The benefiters are going to be the top 200 companies in Australia because they're the ones that will be using the STD routes along the east coast of Australia. This is the most profitable area of telecom and would naturally be the area in which the private entrepreneur would focus his attention.
Members agreed to return to work at 3 o'clock. Although all telecom operations were suspended during the stop work, OOO services remained operative and a skeleton crew was placed on standby in the event of a major fault in the network.
"83-year-old Nina Cook was back on her feet today after 7 months in hospital. Mrs Cook broke her leg in 4 places when she fell in her Mayfield home during the quake.
My house just went up in the air and down again. I went down with it.
Mrs Cook's house was too damaged for her to return, but with a $74,000 interest-free loan and a $9,000 grant from the Lord Mayor's appeal, she's been able to relocate in a retirement home at Mount Hutton. Mrs Cook will repay the loan with the sale of her Mayfield home. Nearly $2 million has been given out in appeal grants and loans of the total $8,189,000. For Mrs Cook, the money has given her security and time to relax with a good cup of tea.
Coal exports for the state increased by 6% this year, but brought in significantly more revenue. Sales total $2.3 billion, an increase of 27% on the previous year. 2/3 of that coal passed through Newcastle, where there's been a dramatic improvement in the efficiency of the port's 2 loaders. From 50,000 tonnes per employee per year in 1988, the loading rate soared to 120,000 over the last 12 months. Productivity at the mines also improved. Days lost by industrial disputes were down by 52% on the 1988 level.
There was no beg pardons today and it was on from the opening bell. Graham made the first break for the Rosellas, but Lake's defence held firm until the 9th minute when Jason Schema crossed. Baker made it 6-0 and 3 minutes later Chris Prigg spent 10 in the bin for flattening West captain coach Mal Graham. Baker's kicking for touch was a highlight of the first half, as was the running battle between Prigg and Graham, and on this occasion it was Graham who had 10 in the bin for an overzealous tackle on Prigg. Peter Webber then opened Lakes up. With the half-time hooter about to sound, Neil Baker snapped a field goal and West led 7-0 at the break. Within 30 seconds of the resumption, Walsh spotted a penalty, but it wasn't until Quinton scored that Lakes were back in the game. Baker regained the lead for West with an excellent penalty, and then the Rosellas went further ahead with an opportune try to Atkins. Lakes weren't to be denied, and after a series of raids, McKinnon crossed. Walsh converted and there was a point in it. Lakes were on the boil and referee Benson gave Lakes a penalty for not allowing McKinnon to play the ball properly. The siren sounded and Walsh had the shot to win the match and a passage to the grand final. Five universities took part in the inaugural competition. Each contestant has to complete 4 compulsory sections: push-ups, high kicks, abdominal curls and stride jumps in a routine that lasts between 1.5 and 2 minutes. The judges are also looking for stamina, strength and flexibility, and Lisa Lisbono from the University of New South Wales turned on a dazzling exhibition to open the show. Unfortunately for Lisa, she twisted an ankle in the final and it was left to fellow Uni of New South Wales student Leanne Turnbull to steal the show and the first prize. Leanne thrilled the smallish crowd with all her movements. In the men's section, tournament coordinator and Newcastle University Aerobics whiz kid Jason Abbott had the crowd in the palm of his hand right from the opening of his routine and, sporting a dazzling green outfit, blitzed his opposition to dominate the men's event.
It's been a 3-year battle for the Bolton Point Marmong Point Progress Association to stop longwall mining at the Teralba Colliery. But despite their efforts, 2 weeks ago the state government gave the green light for extraction of panels 9 and 10. A meeting of residents from Teralba, Marmong Point and Wood Rising Estate, whose properties are likely to be affected by mining, today unanimously supported a recommendation by the Progress Association to seek a court injunction to stop longwall mining.
We believe they're behind us all the way. They have the same opinion as us, and that is that nobody has the right to deliberately damage another person's property.
Residents whose houses are likely to be undermined will make immediate insurance claims against FAI for 20% of their house value to cover devaluation. But perhaps the meeting's most important finding was a covenant of the Quigley estate, now owned by the Department of Housing, on which the majority of houses likely to be affected stand. The document prevents any coal mining in the area, which could damage property. Residents will pay for preliminary legal advice and then seek legal aid to take the matter to the Land and Environment Court. Although it will be a lengthy battle, residents are confident of success.
All that we're really looking for is some support from our politicians and our aldermen and our council, and we believe if we have their support, then we would win.
Despite the widespread publicity surrounding the rationalisation plan, the fate of the Dudley Old Men's Home, a unit of the Western Suburbs Hospital, went relatively unannounced. Even the people who live and work behind its walls were left to hear of the sale second-hand.
It came over the radio. The patients and the staff weren't advised. They only heard it on the radio and they were quite upset about it.
Furious at the government's actions, member for Swansea Ivan Walsh and member for Charlestown Richard Face have described the absence of any formal notification as deceitful. Mr Face said the Rand government had always provided well for the home when it was in power, and that not only was the state government ignoring the needs of the elderly residents, but being party to a huge environmental blunder. The home is flanked by the Glenrock and Aerobics estates. Mr Face believes the development of neighbouring land would be a catastrophe. Echoing Mr Face's concern, Dudley's business community. Already a petition is doing the rounds, and in just 2 days almost 100 signatures have been gathered.
As soon as they've seen it on the counter and read it, they've signed it.
Also concerning locals, lack of regard for the site's historical significance. Donated to the Red Cross by a resident in the 40s, it was used as a returned soldiers' home until it sold to the government in 1960. 2 public meetings have been called to discuss the issue, the first at Dudley School on Wednesday night. The 14-villa complex is part of a Department of Housing program. The two-bedroomed units have sold for $74,500 with financing via Home Fund affordable home loans.
Yes, I think very much the government is keen for the private sector and the public housing sector to come together to meet the costs so that the community has accessible housing.
Unveiling the plaque today, Mrs Greiner said it was making home ownership possible for those who would normally have to stay in the rental market, especially young people and those who are retired. Though this complex is a first for local builders Ecot Constructions, it has proved so popular that 30 more similar units are now under construction at Aerobics.
Although the flood has started to recede in Forbes itself, the water continues to move downstream towards Condobolin, threatening a string of smaller towns.
We're just coming into land at Farmstead of Wilmar, dropping off 2 personnel to aid with the control of his levee banks.
All day, helicopters have rescued farmers trapped on outlying properties. At this farm, 2 small children were lifted to safety. Despite the risk, their parents say it's impossible to leave.
Well, I can't leave. I've got 400 baby pigs in there, plus all the sows and so on, so I can't leave until the very last thing, you know.
It's the same story further west. In the small town of Budjerabong, locals are fighting a desperate battle to save their community.
Happy birthday to you!
Out at the levees, even a birthday party has to be celebrated as best they can.
This is the top part. We're trying to block off here, or else if it broke here, it'd go straight through the township of Budjerabong.
Nearby, this family has been isolated for nearly a week, cut off by road and with no contact with the outside world. Their only hope is for a miracle, that somehow the huge body of water that's advancing along the Lachlan Valley will bypass their tiny island.
Since the earthquake, coaches have been stopping only at Mayfield and Charlestown. With no shelter or terminal, travellers have had to wait on the side of the road in all types of weather. The coach companies have made it plain they're not happy with the situation, but until now they've had no alternative. A proposal, though, by the McNamara group of companies to build a $250,000 terminal at Marketown shopping centre would have solved all the problems. However, just hours before a building foreman was to be appointed, the deluxe coach company pulled out, refusing to travel into Newcastle.
On the day that we were to get this site foreman onto site to start, I had a telephone call from Deluxe and they said exactly that. I'm sorry, Pauline, but we're not going to use your facility. We don't want to come into Newcastle.
Did they give you any reason at all?
Just they didn't want to come into Newcastle. They see it as, I think, a time-wasting effort.
The terminal was to be a gift to the city with no charges levied on the coach companies. The only requirement that they agree to use the terminal for 5 years. But Deluxe claims the Newcastle terminal will add an extra 20 minutes to a journey from Sydney to Brisbane, and they'd rather stop at Broadmeadow. With Deluxe refusing to come into Newcastle and other coach companies also reneging, the future of the Newcastle terminal looks doubtful. And with other organisations unlikely to put up the same amount of money for a terminal at Broadmeadow, visitors to the area are once again out in the cold.
Warren is now ready, as it ever will be, for the flood tide expected to hit within the next few days. And this is what is in store. A huge body of water that is slowly sweeping downstream. For 4 days now, the Army and locals have pitched in together, filling some 28,000 sandbags.
How many bags do you think you filled? Enough?
For many homes, a wall of sandbags is the only defence. A series of levees 9 kilometres long now ring the town, and still today the work continued. The Army engineers, using heavy earth-moving equipment, helped form the barrier that should stop the Macquarie River. Most soldiers have been putting in 16-hour days, nourished by locals well appreciative of their efforts.
Really good. The locals have been really well, helping us out a lot, supplying pies and stuff for us and that, and they've been really good, nice and friendly.
Although the town seems well prepared to withstand the onslaught, some have fled. Around 140 families have moved out, fearing a Ningen-scale emergency.
When Newcastle city centre was closed because of the earthquake, coach operators were forced to find other places to pick up and set down passengers. They soon discovered they could trim 15 to 20 minutes off the Sydney-Brisbane stretch by not coming into the CBD. Now Smart Street in Charlestown and Maitland Road in Mayfield West have emerged as the preferred bus stops for express coaches, although neither site offers any amenities for passengers. It was revealed yesterday that Marketown Shopping Centre had proposed a $250,000 coach terminal, but that Deluxe Coach Lines and Greyhound Pioneer had refused to commit themselves to use the terminal for 5 years.
They didn't want to come into Newcastle. They see it as, I think, a time-wasting effort. In as much as it is, they're saying it's extending their time over a particular route, and that's just a fallacy. It doesn't extend the time at all.
This prompted an angry response from State Member for Newcastle, George Keegan.
As far as I'm concerned, the coach industry has been terribly irresponsible as a group. They provide no facilities, no protection, weather protection for people. They certainly don't seem to give a damn about what happens to people when they get off the bus, in the early hours of the morning, but they're old people or young people, what it is.
In its defence, Deluxe Coach Line says Newcastle City Council has yet to approve the project. Managing Director Jeff McIntyre says his company was not prepared to sign an unprecedented 5-year agreement for a project that was still in the conceptual stages. He said his preferred site was somewhere in Broadmeadow, perhaps here at the Broadmeadow Railway Station. John Church, NBN News.
More than 1,000 Newcastle workers filed into the Broadmeadow Police Youth Club to hear details of new legislation that has been described as the biggest threat to workers' rights this century. The ALP's Jeff Shaw was predictably scathing on the issue, claiming it would destroy the trade union movement and drastically change the role of the industrial courts.
We can argue and do argue that these bills really involve an experiment. They turn New South Wales into an industrial relations laboratory.
Elizabeth Bishop from the Miscellaneous Workers Union, who sat on the ministerial committee which investigated New South Wales industrial relations, told the crowd the government was ignoring its own recommendations.
Most people, the majority of the submissions, supported our system being retained as it is.
The workers voted unanimously to demand the New South Wales Labor Council call for a one-day statewide strike in order to maximise attendance at a rally that will be staged outside Parliament House next Tuesday. The pressure is now on the Democrats and Independents, who hold the balance of power in the upper house.
There are 5 people involved. There are the 2 Democrats, 3 Independents. All we can do is keep the pressure on them, hope that they hold the line to defeat this legislation.
Bruce Mackenzie, NBN News.
Well, I don't know. It would seem that, wouldn't it? Yeah, well, these are all secured, so, if someone tried to come and snatch and grab it, they can't get it out, which is a big bonus.
Increased siltation in Lake Macquarie is a constant problem, but nowhere is it more evident than Swansea Channel. In the past 12 months, established routes through the sandy shallows have been altered dramatically. This has meant that navigation markers placed to guide boats safely through the channel can no longer be trusted.
This particular area over the last 12 months has moved a fair bit to the north, and unless you're a local and you know that, you come in, you follow the marks, and next thing you know you're aground.
Many factors have been cited to explain what's happened. Some blame the new Swansea Bridge pylons, others blame the bad weather and runoff from lakeside development. Whatever the cause, it's clear that Lake Macquarie is being avoided by offshore yacht owners, a point acknowledged by Mayor Ivan Welsh.
So I think everybody would be heading towards Port Stephens or Newcastle Harbour to make a landfall.
So what's the problem with Swansea Channel?
Oh, I guess the shifting sands are the biggest problem, and that hasn't been addressed adequately by either the Public Works Department or any of the other bodies that are responsible for it. What they've done is they've tried to do some experimental works and put breakwaters out which just don't work.
The Public Works Department is responsible for dredging the channel, and last night Lake Macquarie Council asked for a survey to be completed so that it could press the state government for financial help. In the meantime, the Maritime Services Board is battling to keep up with the changes. At the channel entrance, a set of long-established crossover leads have been blacked out because they're no longer accurate. At the dropover, this marker buoy left its mooring in bad weather about 6 weeks ago and ran aground. The MSB is waiting for its contractor to reclaim it from the sand. However, new buoys, including these powered by solar cells, are due to be commissioned in coming weeks. John Church, NBN News.
As a professional commentator, Alan Jones is paid to express opinions. The man who wrote speeches for former Prime Minister Malcolm "Life Wasn't Meant to Be Easy" Fraser and coached the 1984 Wallabies to a Grand Slam win in the British Isles believes the Knights have what it takes to finish in the top 5 in the Winfield Cup.
It's a very, very good side. There are people here that no one's ever heard of who are playing above themselves, and momentum is everything in sport. The psychological belief in what you can do is more than half the battle, so they're going to be very hard to beat.
Jones was in Newcastle supporting the Newcastle Youth Service appeal to fund a home for young mothers. In the audience, Knights coaches Alan McMahon and Alan Bell and captain Mike Hagan. McMahon had private talks with Jones after the luncheon. Jones is an avid supporter of McMahon's coaching methods and says Newcastle should continue its percentage game.
Keep it very simple, make sure you play it down that end of the paddock, make sure you make every tackle fit because you can't afford to miss tackles, and don't be frightened to have a go in the use of the ball. It's that simple.
Rumours that Jones may be changing codes and coaching the Balmain Tigers next year were quashed.
Purely a rumour.
Who's going to be coaching Balmain next year?
I've absolutely no idea, ask Keith Barnes.
As far as it's not going to be Alan Jones.
I've absolutely no idea, I haven't been offered the job.